Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share the work SBE has been engaged in to rethink our approach to accountability in Washington. I want to introduce the panel to start, so I'll have Andrew go first, and then we'll have the LPI team introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Andrew Power, Research Director for the board.
All right, Julie, do you want to take it away for your group?
Sure, I will just introduce us really quickly. I'm Julie Woods, and with me I have Stephen Costio, a Senior Policy Advisor at the Learning Policy Institute, Jeannie Oakes, our resident expert in all things accountability and continuous improvement, and I think we have, and there's Tara Kinney, who leads our state work at the Learning Policy Institute, and we'll do a little more of an introduction here when we start.
Okay, so I'm going to give a little bit of background. It's been a little while since we last engaged with you on our accountability work. We provided some updates to EOGOAC and talked about our plan to rethink how we do this back in November and December of 2020. To get a little bit of input before we started down this road. And then more recently at your last meeting in August, you had a discussion with OSPI around attendance that touched on some of the issues that we're hoping to address as we rethink our approach to accountability as well. In the board's 2019-2023 strategic plan, we had identified the need to make improvements to our accountability and recognition system. And in developing those recommendations, the board reflected on the experience through the development of the ESSA plan and the recommendations of EOGOAC, and noted that there was more work that needed to be done to develop an accountability system that would better support student learning. We started in collaboration with you and with OSPI with substantive changes on our approach to recognition to create a system that was more inclusive and focused much more heavily on growth and improvement than our past models. And the result of that was we recognized a lot of schools that had done some outstanding work that had never been recognized previously. We didn't finish that work, however, and so I'll come back to that in just a moment. The board also had identified indicators that need to be added to the state accountability system to capture issues of school climate, educator effectiveness, disproportionate discipline. These were in line with the accountability work group recommendations from the ESSA plan, as well as recommendations from EOGOAC, but had not been implemented primarily due to data and measurement issues, some changing definitions over that time frame as well. Then COVID happened, and the related disruptions, including but not limited to the suspension of state testing, made virtually every indicator in our accountability framework either unavailable or unreliable. And so with that, we saw an opportunity to rethink what we were doing. And that's what this work is now that we're talking about. The board set itself a task to create a system that was more comprehensive, included inputs, outputs, and outcomes of our system, adding context around the results by taking into account the resources that are brought to the table. In addition, the system would consider earlier indicators to try to develop a system that could truly support improvements in the performance of schools and better serve students. All that's a lot to ask for out of an accountability system, and we realized we needed some additional expertise. And so with that in mind, we engaged Learning Policy Institute to help us on this work. We've asked them to walk through a draft framework, which they're going to share in just a moment, that they've been working on with us over the past several months. Our hope is that as you look at this and respond to it, that what you see will resonate with what you've been advocating for a very long time in terms of how we do this work. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the Learning Policy Institute team. So go ahead, please.
Great. Thank you so much, Randy. And thank you to the members of the EOGOAC for inviting us to join your conversation today. My name is Tara Kinney. I'm the Chief of Staff and Director of State Policy at the Learning Policy Institute. For those of you who may not know our organization, we're a research and policy organization focused on bringing high quality research to policymakers and practitioners to inform the development of evidence-based policies for education, early childhood through K-12, and ultimately to improve learning opportunities for children. And we are really excited to be able to work with the state board and with Washington on this project. This is a remarkable moment in public education at this time of crisis when our systems, including many of our existing school accountability and continuous improvement systems, have been totally upended. That we have this moment, as Randy said, to really rethink things, including around accountability, school recognition, and continuous improvement. And I think Washington's really strong values around equity and the need to address opportunity gaps and achievement gaps, as evidenced by the very existence of this committee, is extraordinary and positions the state really well, I think, to be a leader nationally in this space and a model for others who may want to take up the same set of work. So at LPI, we've been engaged in work around school accountability and continuous improvement since our inception as an organization in 2016. We've published extensively on these issues, including my colleague Jeannie Oakes and Stephen Cosio and Julie Woods, who's the newest member of our team. So we're excited to be able to dive into the work with you here today. I'm gonna pass the ball to the rest of our team to sort of lead you through some of the work that we've been engaged in over the past few months.
Great. Thank you so much, Tara. And Stephen, I think we can move down to the agenda slide. So we are going to take you all on a very whirlwind tour on the work that LPI has been doing to support Washington in this accountability re-envisioning process that Randy was describing. We're going to touch on the goals the state's working toward, explain a little bit about our approach to that and the process that the state is undertaking with LPI's support, describe some key features of the state's education system based on our research, and then hopefully we will have a little bit of time to open it up for discussion with you. So let's start with what are we trying to achieve? So LPI is supporting the state in this process of developing an approach to accountability and recognition and continuous improvement that really focuses on the basic goals that the state has outlined in statute, with an emphasis on how those goals can prepare students for 21st century life, rather than relying on metrics focused on growth and proficiency scores from the traditional standardized tests. You can see on the slide, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, the state has set really ambitious goals for its education system. I'm gonna just read the goals for the education system because I think it's really inspiring and it helps kind of ground us in this work, that education in Washington will provide students with the opportunity to become responsible and respectful global citizens, to contribute to their economic well-being and that of their families and communities, to explore and understand different perspectives, and to enjoy productive and satisfying lives. Those are really just amazing, ambitious goals. And then on this next slide, you can see the educational goals for students are listed in more detail. Those are also defined in state law and are just an integral part of what we are hoping to help Washington achieve. And Stephen will talk a little bit more about how these have been folded into this work and how they're part of the system that we're trying to map out. So let's shift, thank you, to this focus on an equitable system. I think woven throughout all of the goals that Washington has set is an emphasis on equity and all students achieving those goals. We know also that the state board and the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction and this committee, of course, have all have a deep commitment and focus on equity. It's what we're hearing as just an undercurrent of the conversations we've been having with folks in the state. And we at LPI also want to acknowledge the many, many years of thoughtful research and analysis and recommendations that the EOGOAC has produced that have created this energy around equity in the state, and it's supporting the work that we're doing in the state today. And that I also want to note that that's part of why we're here today. As you all know, it's really critical that we get all voices and all communities represented in building and implementing this system to make sure that it's one that works not just for us in this room or in the ad hoc committee, but for all communities in Washington. So our overall goal is really to help build a supportive system of continuous improvement, a system that shifts away from this sort of carrot and stick mentality that we have seen in past systems, and toward a system that's really grounded in research, that evolves over time. It uses information from what the state measures to really guide and support ongoing improvement. Jeannie Oakes, who's here with us today, can speak to a lot of the amazing research that goes into us, but she likes to use the quote that from Edward Deming, that it's not enough to do your best. You have to know what to do and then do your best. And so I think it's really reflective in this work, and that we believe that organizations can improve when people in them have the opportunity to gain knowledge and skill and work with others to achieve quality. When we apply that to improving education systems, we do know evidence shows that supportive accountability systems are those that collect and use a comprehensive set of data that really allows folks to pinpoint real-time problems and inform solutions in a process, a continuous process of improvement. And this is also, you can see it's built into the state's law. There's really a focus on an evolving and adaptable system that can support all students. And then built into supportive continuous improvement is what we refer to as a reciprocal accountability system. So reciprocal accountability here means a shared multi-level approach that recognizes that just focusing on schools and not the rest of the system gives us just limited information. Reciprocity here means holding each level of the system accountable for the contributions it has to make to produce these desired results and goals. So along with establishing the standards and performance goals for students and educators, we also expect that state and local agencies meet certain standards of delivery, because they're a part of sharing responsibility for creating a system that meets its goals effectively and equitably. So rather than rating schools according to students' performance on like a limited set of academic outcomes as prior systems have done, a supportive approach would be able to appraise students' progress toward the broader goals that are outlined in statute, and then report on some of the resources and opportunities that that system provides to enable students to reach those goals. We refer to these types of measures as opportunity to learn or learning conditions indicators, because they're providing information about the conditions under which student outcomes occur. And they show what happens between those inputs and the outcomes for students. So these measures that we've been working to identify in Washington can provide some useful information that supports schools and districts and the state to build a K-12 system that supports all students to meet the state's goals. So I also want to acknowledge here that there's a shared governance over accountability. The state board has been taking the lead on this initial process, but others are really critical to this re-envisioning work, especially the work of OSPI and this committee. And all of this supportive and continuous improvement has to be a whole system effort, right? As you all know, one board or committee can't do that on our own. And then I also as I mentioned, we want to emphasize and ensure that all voices are heard in this process. So the state board has begun a process of stakeholder engagement that's still very early in that process. We at LPI with state board staff had a chance to speak with the technical advisory committee and also to a group of education advocates and membership groups as a start to some of this. I know the state board also has a plan for longer term outreach to the broader public, which includes some work from LPI, but we wanted to take just a moment and walk you through very high level some of the themes that we're seeing in stakeholder engagement and outreach so far, which again, this is very preliminary and it certainly does not reflect all of the communities in Washington. But I think it does start to coalesce around some of the ideas that the LPI has been thinking about in this work. So one big piece that we've heard is that folks are looking for a system that's understandable, that has clear expectations, and it really reflects the community or the school's unique mission. And they don't want a system, or they want to move away from a system that punishes schools for things that they're just not in control of. Another piece we've heard is focusing on ensuring underrepresented groups are a part of the development and use of this system. Related to that, the use of disaggregated data to ensure that we can identify gaps, and also a focus on showing whether students have had not only an opportunity to learn or to access resources, but also to participate. So, you know, it's one thing to know if students have access to an advanced coursework. It's another to note their participation. Those are two different types of information. And then the last piece is this focus on an asset-focused or growth mindset. So focusing on improvement and mastery rather than punishing failure.